So we were just talking about quarantine hair.
Yeah.
What's it like getting haircuts, man? I had to stop getting them in my early 30s.
Uh, yeah, I'll take it. That's I keep saying it year after year. I'm like, I hope this holds on because I don't think I could pull off a good bald look. That's my thing.
Yeah, I'm thankful that my head is proportionate and
Yeah,
nice and round as well.
exactly. That's what.
Otherwise, it would look lumpy and weird. It's just can't do
Yeah,
it.
I don't want to go bald. That's for sure. Not yet, anyways. I haven't accepted it.
Well, as a sign of solidarity with everyone that I know can't get their hairdo, I haven't shaved my head in the whole quarantine period. So
Nice.
I've got this nice black snake moan, Sam Jackson like
Oh yeah,
brown skullet going on. It's amazing.
that's awesome.
Oh man. So how's the quarantine been treating you?
Yeah,
I know that it's rough for musicians and not being able to tour and all that.
yeah.
So
My
what have you
my
been
tour
doing?
did. It's actually been treating me well overall, but my tour did get postponed. We were supposed to be out on a big spring run, and luckily we got ahead of it enough where we didn't have to cancel that whole tour. We were actually able to move the entire thing with all the same bands and pretty much the same venues to the fall. So now it's just fingers crossed that nothing goes crazy with the like we've already heard the talks of, yeah, like essentially no, state to state it's going to be different, I'm sure, but they'll do no gatherings bigger than whatever number.
Mm,
And
yeah.
since we're playing arenas, I would imagine if they do anything like that, we'll fall out of that range. But well, day to day it seems to change, so we'll play it by ear. But overall, yeah, things have been good. I've just been jamming at home and doing a ton of housework, which is actually kind of nice to keep up on or do for that matter, because I've been, the last 2 years I've been running around a decent amount. So yeah, other than that, it's been good.
Is that part of your homework projects that behind you there? Is that did you build that wall?
No, that wall was here when I moved in. It sure looks like it though. It's actually, if you watch any of my drum videos, you'll notice it now. It's the wall behind my kit. So
Nice.
I just sit down here anytime I do interviews or anything, because upstairs the natural lighting is so crazy that down here it just makes more sense.
For sure, for sure. Have you been doing a lot of online lessons as well? And I know you do that
Yep, been
periodically.
teaching. Been teaching a decent amount, not overboard, but fit it in that makes sense to my schedule, and it's good to keep the teaching train going because I didn't teach as much the last like 2 years,
Mhm.
and it's nice to kind of get back to it now and a little more comfort because that's basically all I did before Death Punch was like teach, like random job here and there mixed in with it during the day, and then obviously just playing drums, studio stuff, and the list goes on and on. But yeah, it's kind of fun to get back to teaching again and get that. It's like a muscle. You need to kind of keep it working, or you feel like you lost it in certain ways.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's well, I mean, that kind of goes for anything you got to do physically with your body. Like even, just if you're like a martial artist for some reason and you don't go to the gym, which is happening a lot right now. A lot of people
Oh yeah.
can't go to train or whatever. I expect a lot of rusty people.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. I know no gym. That's kind of a drag. I just do, I got some 40-pound dumbbells and some other free weights that I can at least keep some form going on.
Mhm.
And I came out of the European tour I did really thin anyways. So it was actually good that I kind of could put some weight back on, even if it's not exactly the weight I want.
Right.
it, it's at least like something to burn again, which is,
Sure.
which has been good. But yeah, I'm looking forward to hitting the gym again. That's for sure.
Yeah, man. I wanted to ask you about that transitionary period for you. I mean, I'm sure you talked about it years ago, but I find it interesting going from a band like you were playing with Scale the Summit for a bit,
Yep. Yep.
and those are homies. I mean, I had Killian on. I'm friends
Oh,
with
killer.
Jordan, and
Yeah. Yeah.
a bunch of dudes that are that band kind of has like a rotating door of musicians that come and go. All of them of which are insanely talented.
Yeah.
Uh, but going from like a smaller scale, kind of a proggy techie project to some massive arena like fire and props and shit like that. So how is that transition for you financially, and then also now how is it is it declining? Is it kind of like is it contract based now that you can't play shows? Like how does that work out for you?
For me personally, well, like, yeah, I'll answer that question in order. So the transition was great. it was one of those things where, like, although I was always doing, like I was known as a prog techie metal guy, and touring clubs, and more of the, a lot of internet like followers and all of that stuff. And so then to jump into the arena thing, the beauty of it was I had always dreamed of doing that, and it kind of was one of those things where you fulfill a goal that you always knew you could accomplish, but you just didn't know how it would be accomplished. So I didn't expect Death Punch or anything, but I knew, like, someday I'm going to get my shot someday at the big shows, because I just enjoy, like, large production, big. I grew up, like, going to late 80s and early 90s shows. My parents were big, like, hair metal junkies.
Nice.
So they'd bring me to all the, like, Skid Row, Slaughter, Winger, Warrant, Kiss, whatever, you name it, AC/DC, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Motley Crue, even though I've actually never seen Motley Crue live, funny enough, but I listen the shit out of them. But I've always pictured that as being my end goal, and so to accomplish it was nice. And transition-wise, like, as far as it being overwhelming or anything, it felt great to go into the big shows. I enjoy that energy, that give and take of the crowd way more. But so great transition there. Financially and stuff, it was amazing because it was the first time I had any sort of balance in my life financially. I've always been like feast or famine my entire existence, which on one hand has been good because it taught me a lot of different things, and I never like gave into the man sort of a thing, so I always kept my head on my shoulders. I mean, I had corporate jobs and whatnot, but they would last a year before I'd be like, all right, I can't do this anymore. So as far as like, financially, it was just great to get some stability in my life. And it's money wise and stuff, not to beat it to death or get into details with it, but for like at first when I joined them, it was right into a tour. So it was contract based because they didn't know if they could keep me around. And essentially it was like Jeremy calling me and being like, hey, I know you're coming to hang out with the band next week, because they were playing in Chicago. Mm-hmm. So I'll kill two birds with one stone with this talk. And I was on the phone with Drumeo, or like a Skype call actually with Drumeo, which I had planned in November of like 2018 it was already. And then my phone kept blowing up, and I looked over and I saw it was like Zoltan and Jeremy, and I had like been talking to the guys and Jason a lot, especially. And Jeremy I'd already known for like a year and a half, like through the internet. So I saw it blowing up. I get off the Drumeo call and I call him, and literally it was basically as easy as like, hey man, I know you're coming to hang out with the band in Chicago next week. Can you learn some tunes and jam on stage with us, or with the guys? This is Jeremy talking. Jam with the guys because I want you to do the fall tour. I need to find somebody and you're my guy. So I'm like, okay. So it's like a weird drummer's like dream. I wouldn't call it nightmare in any sense of the word, but it's a dream come true. Yet at the same time, Drumeo was always like one thing where I was like, man, to get invited to Drumeo would be amazing. And then I had to call Drumeo back and cancel, that's a goofy thing to do. So went out. Then a week later, jammed with the boys, hung out with them for a few days, and then did that tour like 2 months later. So that was contractual. And now we're just word of mouth agreement, essentially, because that's the way they like to operate, and I prefer that as well. It's not very like, you don't feel like you're getting treated like a fill-in puzzle piece. They did a great job of making me feel like a band member out of the gate, knowing that obviously from my angle, coming into a freight train that's moving 1,000 miles an hour, that's already now established as like a premier arena rock band. And for them, like, hey, we got this new guy on, like, have fun, They were really good about like keeping it all cool, and it never felt like, all right, man, don't screw this up or anything like that. So it started as a contract, and now it's just word of mouth, and it's nice. It feels good. Especially getting a record under the belt now too. Yeah. It helps. And it's a great situation for me.
That's awesome, man. That's great to hear that they took care of you. It didn't really feel kind of like a replacement, studio musician kind of, because that happens. And when you reach a certain level, like you got to make sure that that production is top notch and everybody's on point. And so you end up, if that's the goal of the band, then you end up picking the best players to make sure that production is perfect.
Right.
And I always I respected your work in Scale the Summit, and just seeing some of your videos online. So it was kind of a shocker, to be honest. I was just like,
Yeah.
wow, okay.
Yeah, you're not the only one to think that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's random. It's a random thing.
Yeah, because I was even shocked to know, because I'm not a big fan of the band
Sure.
itself.
Mm-hmm.
I was more into the proggy techie stuff, and I started looking into it. And I'm like, I know I had heard the name, Five Finger Death. It's a huge name. It's everywhere. I see like the music all over the place. But then when I saw the announcement of the tour with Megadeth, and then
Yeah.
I also saw that you guys were billed on top of Megadeth. It was
Yeah.
like Five Finger Death Punch with Megadeth. I'm like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah, I know. A lot of people said that too. Like I read some of the comments. I love reading the comments on Death Punch posts. They're great. And I saw a lot of that too, of like, oh my God, the arena's going to be empty when Megadeth is over. And I mean, yeah, love, hate the band, whatever you want with Death Punch. The fact of the matter is like we headline everything now, and the crowds are ours. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like Megadeth, oh, they were amazing. That tour was amazing. Obviously, we could go off on that because just to get to watch them every night was like, this is real. Megadeth is opening for me, huh? All right.
That's got to be so surreal, man.
It was so surreal. Me and Chris and like a lot of the Bad Wolves guys and stuff, we would sit back there and just laugh. We're or not sit back there, meaning we'd sit on the side of the stage and be like, how is this even real right now? Like we're just on tour with those boys. All right, sounds good. And they were the nicest guys and the nicest crew, and like it was so smooth. Like we all talked at the end about it, not band to band, but just mix of guys of like we got to do this again. This was a beautiful tour.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a surreal moment. But the funny thing that we laughed about a lot too, especially me and Chris when we would watch from the side, is like you could tell like a lot of the people watching didn't know. You could tell the Megadeth fans for sure. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of the other people, you could tell they were just jamming out to a rock band, and that it's weird. You would think there's more of a crossover of fans there, which I'm sure there is a little bit, but not nearly as much as I expected. And it was like then Death Punch would hit the stage, and you could just see the difference in like kind of the roar of the crowd. And it was amazing to me to really sit back and watch, like almost like objectively, and be like, I cannot believe that this many people would get this insane for us versus Megadeth just playing right before us. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it was such a great tour. I mean, I think we sold out almost every show on that tour, which was, large crowds. Like to end the tour, it was like 13,500 in Sofia, Bulgaria or something, which is just, it was so much fun, man. And just to do it with Megadeth it's so weird. But yeah, to get back to the initial topic of it was odd for a lot of people to hear I joined the band coming from such a techie, prog guy, when there's all these arena guys that are known that could hop on the bill and fit the gig perfectly,
Yeah. I mean, it makes more sense to me technically. Like I would go, if I was in a big arena band, I want to go get me a super tight a prog guy. Somebody who knows every aspect of the drum set, because most of the techie proggy metal guys also venture into like Latin rhythms and jazz and all that. So it kind of lends itself to kind of anything. Whereas if you were to get a very straightforward, someone who's a studio musician that only does arena rock bands, you kind of have like it's limited. It's expected what you're going to get.
Yeah.
But you can probably, I haven't been to a show with you playing yet with them, but I can imagine, like, do they give you a moment to do like a drum solo and stuff like that?
Yeah, I do a solo.
Nice.
And I keep it like arena rockish, but I definitely go off the rails. Like I make sure to empty the tank on that every night. And I mean, anybody who knows my playing from before, like, yeah, it is really technical and kind of like, like a jazzy Latin. You can tell I studied a lot of like West African and Afro-Caribbean and Brazilian stuff. Mm-hmm. If you really like pay attention to certain rhythms and whatnot. But the one factor I think that helped me out transition wise from the prog world into the arena rock stuff is I'm such a hard hitter naturally. Like, so I dig into everything and I can kind of do it in a way that looks smooth. So it's not like I'm stiff armed from the shoulder, like a basher. Right. And I think the guys, especially, I know Zoltan, he's told me like, we don't want a guy back there just struggling to keep up, because like we talked about, despite whether you like the music or hate it, the drum gig is not as easy as it sounds. Like it's really not. To do it tight and powerful every night is actually a lot harder than you would think. And you see a lot of guys who play heavy stuff, and they have to be more reserved. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then there's guys like a great one that comes to my mind would be like Ray from Korn, where, you know, he's a great drummer no matter what situation you're going to throw him in. And so he makes that stuff look easy, and he's also still hitting super clean and hard, and he's not like ever struggling to do anything. And that was a big aspect that they thought about too, is like, we want a young dude who's ready to smash, who can do it all, but doesn't have to do, you know, 25% of his capabilities, which I think that shows at, you know, when you watch, especially like if you saw me night to night or something.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, man. Again, like I said, that's what I would go with if I was in a position to have to fill in a band member. You know, just go with someone who's technically incredible, and then, you know, you guys make it work.
Yeah.
And going back a little bit on the crowd thing, you were mentioning that you expect a little more crossover. Like I can see, you know, the fact that Megadeth fans are, I guess, older. And, you know, not as excited or not as loud, I guess, you know, more reserved, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Whereas, you know, Five Finger Death Punch is obviously aimed towards a more younger audience. So I guess that would create that excitement in the room, I guess.
Yeah, a little bit of that for sure. No question about it. And also, I think it being the case of like Death Punch fans kind of transcend age ranges now because of it's like when they first hit, those people are now parents. So like there's a lot of kids and like teenager-ish ages there too that just get into the band because their dad loves it, that type of stuff. Okay. It's very like, our fan base is super like it's almost like a sports team effect or something. Like you feel like part of the team, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And sure. Megadeth, I think the reason they probably did a tour like this is because Dave was coming out of the cancer treatment. So to headline a tour coming out of that, and you don't know where you're going to be, makes sense to like co-headline and do that sort of a thing. And then to do shorter sets, you know, that allowed him to play 60 minutes a night rather than we play 90. And also crowd-wise, yeah, like you say, that the Megadeth crowd is, you know, it makes total sense for them to take a tour like that because they reach people that they haven't necessarily reached as much of, because Megadeth isn't as prolific on the radio as they once were, where they used to be, you know, insanely massive on the radio. And so now it's like you get a radio crew that will definitely latch on to Megadeth riffs and attitude and stuff like that. So it's kind of a win-win for both bands, you know?
Yeah. It's interesting you bring up the radio thing. Like it's so weird to me that a band like Megadeth, for example, was, you know, at the top of the game, always on the radio, everywhere you go, and now it's harder for them, and it doesn't make sense. Like, why wouldn't they keep playing Megadeth songs? But then again, radio overall, like I don't listen to radio at all, just because they kind of pick a certain group of songs and they just cycle those over and over and over for like a month, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely is that way on the radio in all genres too, like country does, you know, they all do it, the pop. And it's kind of flavor of the week attitude. And I don't know when that really started, because I feel like I'm 35 and I feel like it's almost always been that way. It's just that over the years, you know, and this is, I'm thinking out loud. It just feels like over the years, though, where you used to hear, like, yeah, I would hear Trust and Symphony of Destruction and all those tunes like 5 times a day. And I'm sure you still do a little bit, but it definitely seems to be catering more, radio in general, catering more to like big choruses, you know what I mean? Like driving verses into big choruses. Like the formula isn't rocket science anymore, and it's more a matter of, can you do it in a good way? You know, like can you write a good tune that's catchy and still has attitude, or blah blah blah. And yeah, it's interesting when you take a band like Megadeth or Metallica for that matter. I mean, and they're still probably, I don't know, it's safe to say they're as big as they've ever been.
Yeah. I mean, Metallica's huge, and you know, every time they drop a new album, it's a big deal. It's not like they, you know, go. No one's like, oh, another one. Like everybody's like, yeah, cool, a new album.
But you never hear the singles. That's the weird part. Like,
Yeah.
they come out with a new album, and yeah, like you say, there's big talk about it, and you hear it and like, oh, cool. But yeah, I couldn't tell you the last time I heard a Metallica single from any of the recent, like Death Magnetic or any of those, Saint Anger, any of those. You hear the old classics.
Right. I wonder what the numbers are, and kind of just what the importance is of radio at this point with Spotify and Google Music and all that being around. Like, it's so much better to have a playlist that's like catered to all the different things you like, as opposed to like, here are 5 songs that we're getting paid to play. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's and no disrespect to those 5 songs. It's just after a while.
Right. Yeah, and it's why do they get picked, and how, and who, and there's a lot to it in a way, because exactly, you're like, the playlist, when it comes to the playlist and stuff like that, and streaming numbers, you wonder like how they actually are based on the radio plays, if that makes sense how I worded that, where like the correlation between the two, you wonder if the radio plays help dictate the Spotify plays and stuff like that, which I personally think they probably do a little bit, because despite what any of us proggy or thinkers or whatever you want to call it, like where you're into kind of more undergroundy stuff you're never going to hear on the radio, like despite what we think, like 90% of the population is popping on that radio every day, and it's the soundtrack to their life. And so I think that plays into it.
Yeah, I mean, when you guys were doing this tour, did you do a lot of those like morning radio kind of like promotional interviews to promote the show and get tickets sold?
Not really. We're kind of at the point now. We did promotion and stuff, but it was like the day of the show is like for a later date, or like the local radio, just like a classic radio show of like, yeah, the boys are in town. But we pretty much sold out every show before we even started the tour.
Wow, that's incredible.
And we did that. We've done that. Technically now I've done 4 tours with them, including like a small summer run. So summer run aside, like the 3 headlining tours we've done, that's kind of been the case for all of them. And then I know like even the next tour that we were supposed to do with it's like I Prevail, I'm blanking on a few of them, but Papa Roach is the main one with us, the main support. I think that one was pretty much sold out as well, like for the most part going into it. So I think it's kind of coming to the fact of like, the band is getting so big, the promo is really just kind of a side piece that will only help, it can't hurt. So yeah, it's crazy. The numbers are crazy when you really break them down and look at the shows, and it's like, wow, I played in front of 12,000 again last night. Oh, all right,
So you're 35.
Yep.
And your goal was to play arena rock. Like, what now?
Great question, man. Dude, it's funny you say that, because that's exactly what I've asked myself many times through the last 2 years, because the first year was like so transitionally crazy, which was technically, I guess, all of 2019, where it was like, I didn't know what was up or down anymore. Because like part of it doesn't feel real, where you're like, this could disappear at any second. What am I going to do then?
Yeah.
And, but now that it's settled in and stuff, and I think about, what do I do now? And I think it's just going to come back to creatively, it's going to be doing my own projects. Like,
it's a race car outside, apparently.
Funny. Sounds fun.
Yeah.
It'll be doing my own projects with like buddies and stuff from all the different genres, if you will, and then with Death Punch, now that I'm in more with the guys, it'll be like when something comes up with them, focus my energy towards that, and they don't block me out of anything now. Like it's like a group conversation, which is nice, because when you're on the sidelines, if you will, or like you're new to the band, you don't want to step on toes, and like I don't know their systems, especially
Right.
a year ago. So it's like I don't want to like come in and piss people off and be like, "Oh, dude, let's try something like this," But they love hearing my ideas, and so I can always focus my energy there when needed. And then the big things for me, goals wise, I guess, would just to be, make more use out of all the skills I've developed over these years, which would be a lot of like even writing tunes. I love like soundscapey synthesizer stuff, like I mean, from the Midnight style of things to more like Hans Zimmer style of things. Like I love that whole vibe. So I think I want to do like a drum based album that's to that stuff, because as much as I love drum solos, I hate them. So it's like this contradictory feeling of like, dude, I don't want to hear another drum shred. Like, you'll even notice in my videos lately, I don't really shred as much as I used to. I can still do it, but I don't get much out of like, there's a lot of drummers out there that are big on the internet scene. They'll just shred over like a rap tune that's popular or a pop tune.
Mm-hmm.
And it's cool because everybody loves crazy drum licks, myself included. But it gives it no life or anything. And so I prefer like, all right, how can I take my little solo drum style that I do with these Instagram videos I post and make that kind of more musical? And I feel like synthesizer-based stuff would be the way to do it, because it just creates the vibe you're going for, and it's not overwhelming, and vice versa. The drums can complement the synths and blah, blah. So I think that'll be my main focus here soon. And then is teaching is like developing a better method of teaching while on the road,
Okay.
Gone so much. It's like I might as well come up with a proper way to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you brought up the like the synthy kind of synth wave.
Yeah.
That tends to happen to a lot of folks that are in heavy bands. Like if you're in a really heavy band, usually the passion project ends up being kind of a more subdued, melodic kind of electronic type of project.
Yeah, it's true.
It's funny. Chris Penny has been doing something similar to that.
I haven't caught up with him in a while as far as his projects and stuff. He's a monster.
He's. I spoke to him. Well, I had him on the show, but then afterwards, like we became friends and we just shoot messages back and forth. And he's doing like soundtrack kind of back work for commercials and other like film and anything with like a lot of synth and it makes sense to me in my head. Like it's so complex. People don't understand. Like you hear a synthy song and you're like, maybe it's a sequence and you just push a button and
right.
It's not. There's a lot of work that goes into that.
Yeah, there absolutely is. It's overwhelming when you start to dive into the world. Like I bought like a Moog Mother 32 and started to kind of get into, and Naveen Coppervice is into this stuff too, and that's who kind of got me into it a little bit more. Like I've always loved the sounds of everything, but I didn't really know how they were being made, or like when it comes to analog or modular stuff. And so I got into that, and it was like, oh, I get it now. This isn't just so plug and play.
Right.
And when you hear the plug and play stuff, you can totally differentiate that from the like created soundscapey stuff of like the masters,
Yeah. It's funny you say that. It's also how I feel with like when people use synthetic guitar tone on like a programmed guitar tone, like I can tell that you're not in an amp. And I know some people say like, oh no, the technology's there, it's perfect. I'm like, no, I can tell that you're not.
Yeah, love it or hate it, you can tell the difference for sure. And so exactly, it's I know that argument's been going on a lot, and they're definitely getting better, but I wouldn't necessarily equate better with more like an amp. I would say you get more of that dynamic range that an amp offers, so that it feels more real and granular and like, just it's more palatable or something, where when it's so super processed, you can feel the flatness in it, especially in heavy music, obviously, where everything's so gated anyways.
Yeah. I have so many things running through my head like, as we were talking that I want to ask you about. Like
Sure.
you mentioned, that the band is open to your ideas. Did you do writing in the F8 that came out in February or?
Yeah. I didn't do a ton of it, but I did chunks and like there'd be, like there's a bunch of chunks that I was a part of in it essentially. And you can kind of tell which ones, and those are primarily me and Zoltan together, because I went down there for like 2 weeks, and him and I would just jam on riff ideas and stuff that he had, and whatever we would kind of mix and match and craft it and just try to get it to another level of like, he'd throw something at me and then we'd take it and run with it type of thing. So yeah, I got to actually be involved in that one more so than I would have thought I would have been, considering I just came off that first tour and they had already kind of been writing, by default, because it was on that tour, that first tour I did, it was a big topic, obviously, because I shared a dressing room with Jason then, and so we would jam too, like him and I would jam on some ideas. But yeah, so I got to be part of chunks of that record.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. And the other thing I had in my head, kind of that we passed over while talking about live shows, was I wanted to ask, what kind of team are we looking at with that production? How many trucks and how many road crew people are we looking at? Because I mean, I worked in that field for a while of arena shows. I was working for the arena doing stagehand work,
Yep.
and I always found it fascinating and like a thing in my own head where I'd be like, well, Aerosmith's here and they got 25 trucks. Like,
Yeah.
like, so
Yep.
what are we looking at with Five Finger Death Punch? Like, how
We're
many
about
trucks?
Yeah, we're about I would say most of these tours we've done, I feel like we scaled it back a little in Europe, not the show, but I felt like there was less trucks, but maybe it was just me, who knows. Generally speaking, I'd say we got about five-ish, something like that.
Okay,
Uh,
okay,
I would say about five semis, maybe a couple more. Um, but yeah, about five. And then like crew wise, we're actually pretty contained. Like everybody knows each other, for the most part. And honestly, between like if we like discounting like personal assistant style types and tour managers and stuff, but just like road crew and hands, honestly, we can't be more than like, the 25 range, give or take five. Um,
okay.
it's a sizable but small crew, in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
But then
I
we
always
all have
found that
extra
interesting.
stuff.
Yeah, I always found that interesting to see how many crew members too, because a lot of people don't take that into consideration. And I always find it also fascinating when there's a popular band and I see them just bringing their own stuff on stage. I'm like, how do you not have a crew?
Yeah. Yeah, I've thought that many times with the boys that I hang out with randomly, where it's like, they're a bigger band and yet it's kind of just them with, usually a tech or two, like, I don't know, Gojira even, or Between the Bear to Me or something, where there's not a lot of guys running around in those crews.
No, no, yeah, yeah. Between the Bird and Me is a good example. I've been there just watching them unload. I'm like, what are you doing?
Oh yeah, they'll go grab their own stuff, help out.
Like,
Like,
what happens if you crush a finger? Like, come
yeah,
on.
I know, it's so true. I know it's funny too, because I think if you took the average, we'll use BT Bam as an example because they wouldn't care if I talk shit about them in terms of like spew out things that aren't really necessarily true. But where it's like the average fan of BT Bam, let's say, who looks up to them and kind of pedestal, which I did when, like when Colors came out and stuff, I was just like, God, these guys rock. You wouldn't think, or Periphery or something like that, where they're bigger in the prog world, but they're really not that big. But you would think like, oh, these guys got it made. Like dudes are doing everything for them, or like, they just get on stage and play and stuff. But a lot of those bands on that level ish, they have a tech and that's about it, and they help their tech out. So it's just like there's a lot more movement involved than people would ever think of bands at that level, which are big bands, really.
Yeah, yeah. If you had one like a fantasy band that you could join,
Yeah,
what would that be?
that's a great question. Tool, I have to go Tool.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're gonna step into the shoes of Danny Carey?
Yeah, I could do it. I could. Danny was such a big idol of mine. Like my playing style and his are a lot more similar than well, I wouldn't say it's like a weird thing to compare our styles, but I could flawlessly enter that band and know like 90% of the material off the top of my head still. And like it wouldn't feel all that different. Except for I don't know if he plays to a click or not. I know he doesn't record to one. That part, no thanks, Danny. You can do that. I'm not getting up there playing without a click to those tunes. I would get too adrenalized and want to fly through the fucking ceiling. I don't know if I can swear on this one, but
Yeah, you can. Yeah. It's funny that you say that too, because a lot of people give musicians like not a lot of people, but there are people that give musicians shit for being on a click. Like, well,
oh yeah.
you can't play without a click. It's like actually probably not. Not because I'm bad, but more because of I get excited.
Yeah, it's different live than in a studio. Like, or I want to click all the time because my thing is this: the click doesn't. Some people make the mistake. This is going to sound too lessony. I'll keep it short. Some people make the mistake when they think of playing to a click. They think you're aiming at this click all the time. Like, all right, I got to hit it there and there and there, and they look at it like a line that is continuous. The click plays you. It's the old like saying within, especially like music nerds, is like you don't play the click plays you. All the click is doing is it's putting you in the vibe and the energy motion of where you're supposed to be. If you're a shitty drummer or guitar player for that matter, and you're not good at a click, what that means, generally speaking, is you're aiming at every beat that you're hearing, expecting to be between two. It's like the old saying of what's between 0 and 1. There's a lot between 0 and 1. So if you're speeding up and slowing down between 0 and 1, you're going to feel that push and pull every beat that goes by. So the click thing gets overhyped with like exactly what you said, where people are like, oh man, you should be able to play it without a click, man, that's feeling the music. Yeah, the reality is feeling the music means you're going to go up and you're going to go down based on your energy that day. If you wake up and you're tired of shit and you got to go play a show in front of 10,000 people, I'm not going to give them a crappy show because I don't feel like, you know, like I'm up to it or something and be like, oh man, I can't play to a click, that's giving up on life, or like I'm on the craft. I don't know, that attitude to me is bizarre, because if I feel tired, some songs feel fast to me. When all of a sudden the click hits and I'm like, oh, good thing I'm on that click, I would have been slow. Or vice versa, which is 90% of drummers' issue, is you want to play, and this goes for guitar players too, I'm not throwing drummers under the bus, you want to play faster than you should be playing. You know, it's like you can't help it. You're fired up, the crowd's yelling, you're freaking out in a good way, and it's just like that click just keeps you balanced. So you're like, oh yeah, okay, here I am, and then you settle in there. And so yeah, that click talk is funny, but it still does blow my mind, to give Danny Carey props, that from what I've all heard, he records those albums without a click, and then they program the click to his ebbs and flows for the rest of the band to record to a click that he dictated, essentially.
Wow.
That's pretty wild. And I don't know like how many, you know, like like a song like Ticks and Leeches or something that's 8 minutes long. I don't know how many takes he cuts up, or I've never heard, you know, like, is it 7 chunks of tunes, or, you know, of the tune that he's playing, and so it's easier for him to like do a chunk, it feels that way, it feels great. Do another chunk, it feels that way. Or I don't know any of that, but I have heard that's the way he does it. And I would love to talk to him and ask him more in detail about that process, because holy shit, that's something.
Yeah, that's insane, man. That's insane. And I've talked about this before on the show, but with another drummer as well. But the click track and drumming and the connection to dancing, like salsa dancing, for example. I used to do that years and years ago, and the music itself kind of has a click track in it. Spanish music, like salsa, has the it's kind of like a cowbell, or I don't know, la clave, yeah. And it's basically a click track. Oh yeah. And when you're dancing, that's what you're listening to. Like, I don't even hear the music. I'm just hearing the and that's how I know what rhythm I need to, you know, speed up or go to, you know.
Exactly. Yep. No, it's totally true. And that is a great point. A lot of normal music, if we will, like normal could mean a lot of things, but you know what I mean? Like popular music in whatever genre it is, it has a sense of a click track generally. Like if I'm getting up there playing AC/DC every night, yeah, I can do it without a click and it's going to sound good and be close every night, you know, because it's a click within itself.
Right.
Tool or Dream Theater or something like that, you're on a whole nother level of like precision. And really, even Dream Theater is maybe even a bad example, because Tool is more floaty and atmospheric, where you could easily be 20 BPM off or 15 BPM off one night on a section that you get to, and you just suck it way back. And it's like you didn't even feel it at the time because it felt so good to pull it back that you kind of went with how good it felt to pull back. And now all of a sudden you're 15 BPM slower. And whether that's a problem or not is another discussion, you know, because sometimes that feels great. Like with Death Punch, we play like 3 tunes without a click.
Nice.
And every night it feels a little different because it's kind of based on the flow of the band and the energy. And I'll watch back and be like, oh, damn, I was playing a little slower that night. You know, it felt good. Or even faster feels good sometimes. It just depends. But as long as you're kind of grooving with whatever vibe you're on, it's going to sound good even if it's a 10 BPM fluctuation. It's just a matter of choice at that point, I think.
Yeah, and all, you know, like you said, if it's a problem or not, like that's also based on the fan that's listening as well.
Exactly.
You know, some nerdy musician guy like myself would be like, "Oh, they're off by 5. I can tell," you know. Or other people are just, you know, stoned and like, "Wow, I'm feeling this, man." You know, like it's different.
Oh, it's so subjective. Totally is. And personally, I go back and forth on what I like better, because there's times where I hear myself playing to a click on stage, and I know I'm to a click, and I'm like, God, I wish that was like 5 BPM slower. It'd feel a little better, like it feels on top of itself. And then vice versa, I'll feel it too slow, and I'll be like, dude, I wish you would have just been on the edge a little more, like on the front edge of it. But it's just like you said, man, it's so person to person. You can't really think too much about it. As long as you're making it feel good, that's kind of where my resolution to that debate in my head always comes back to, is like, fuck, man, if it feels good at the time, you just got to roll with it anyways.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure.
Studio's a different topic, though.
Yeah. Hobbies before, like the last two things I have are hobbies and beer.
Cool.
So do you have any hobbies outside of music, and do you drink any kind of beer or any kind of drink?
Yeah, hobbies outside of music, I got tons of them. But the main ones would be like hockey, fishing, all outdoor stuff. Hunting, I don't do as much anymore, but I grew up doing it nonstop.
Nice.
I just don't have the time these days, but I go to the woods a lot still and camp and just kind of exploring any of that stuff outdoors. I live in Minnesota, so the Northland caters to that.
Sure. Yeah.
Me and my buddies fish a lot. And then, yeah, a lot of hockey still. I skate when I can, and I've still kind of played up until now. Like, try to join leagues when I can and stuff.
Very cool.
And then, yeah, I love cars and guns. I like all of those things. I got a new WRX STI, which I really like. So I've been goofing off with that the last few months, adding stuff to it and, spending money on it.
Nice.
And yeah, that's pretty much it for the most part. I get into like little dorky things all the time. I'm like I get really into something, and then it becomes like OCD, and I get obsessed with it for a while. So
Nice.
yeah, there's always these little things that come in for a few months and go, but the main ones are that. And then
model airplanes.
oh, dude, yeah. I flew RC airplanes for years. I actually was considering getting another one, but I lived in a house where behind me was a giant field. So we would fly EDF jets, which are like electronic duct fans, and they go like 100 miles an hour, 120 miles an hour.
Wow.
And we went through the learning curve of those, and they are so much fun. So I did that for years and spent way too much money getting good at it. And it's addicting as hell, though. So yeah, that's a prime example of one of the geeky little hobbies I might pick up for a few years. But that's pretty much it. I get outside, and then beer and stuff. Yeah, I drink not a ton of beer. I would say when I do, a lot of my buddies are into all the craft stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I end up drinking generally like weird IPAs that they have, like ones off the top of my head that I enjoy. Like I like a lot of the Surly's I try.
Surly's great. Yeah.
Yeah, like the Furious, I can always have one of those. But mainly I drink like vodka mix based drinks, and then like I'll throw in White Claws to just keep her easy, and so I don't mix a ton of strong drinks all day out on the lake or something.
Sure.
Just to keep I like the like clear, like I'll do like vodka sodas with limes, and then like this is like a vodka grapefruit juice and soda water because I like a little sugar in there mixed in once in a while. And then I like all the crafty, like any craft cocktail bars, like the kind of overpriced but super custom drinks. I love any of those, generally speaking. So yeah, I like all the classics too, mojitos, Moscow mules, any of that stuff.
Nice. Yeah, it's actually been my quarantine drink of choice has been vodka with stuff.
Yeah.
Like whatever I can mix it with in the house.
Right.
Like
I'll do that too. I'll bounce around. It'll be like, what do I got in the house today? All right, I'll use that.
Yeah, I opened up the freezer yesterday. I'm like, oh my God, I have frozen berries. Vodka and frozen berries. Let's go.
That's perfect. That sounds tasty.
Yeah, man. It's been weird. Like I was a big beer head for a while. I worked in the industry. The rock and roll beer guy.
Yeah.
But lately, yeah, I've just been, also health wise, it's not good to drink beer all the time. You get huge.
It adds up for sure.
And like I put a video up yesterday from 2018, and I was like maybe 40 pounds heavier, dude. This is when I was in the industry.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I believe it too. You can tell. I mean, even some buddies of mine who get heavy into the crafty beers, and they'll drink like 6 of them a night, and they're so thick. And not that 6 is a lot in terms of getting buzzed up, but in terms of the calories and 6 of those or something, it's going to be super heavy.
Yeah, and a lot of the new like IPAs, they are the hazy ones or the juicy ones that they're talking about.
Yeah.
Those are super fattening because they're filled with sugar. They put
Sugar
milk
and
sugar
corn
in there.
syrup and so much crazy stuff in there too. And you can almost tell when you're drinking it. You're like, there's no way this is just like an old school lager beer style mixture. You know, this has got some stuff in it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
They're tasty though. I'll enjoy one of those, but usually if I'm drinking, it's to catch a little buzz. And the beers, it would take too many of them. I couldn't drink that many because I'm not a big beer guy, and so the taste wears on me after about 2 or 3 of them.
Do you drink at all before a show to calm the nerves, or do you just laser focus?
No. Yeah, I never drink before a show. There's been times where I'd like go out to lunch or something and have a couple, but by the time I play, it's long gone. But the main reason I don't drink before a show is, number one, if I ever fucked anything up, it can never be that I was buzzed up or drunk. And then number two, it makes it so much better that then after the show, if I go out with some buddies or something, and then we can have that first drink and it feels good, you know?
Hell yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hey man, I appreciate your time, Charlie.
Sure.
Charlie the Engine.
Funny story on the engine part. That started because in a ton of podcasts and interviews I had done before Death Punch, they would be like, "Oh, I'm with Charlie Engen," so I got called Charlie Engen all the time. And Ivan picked up on that, and he's like, "Dude, you're the engine. Like, it makes total sense. You're like an engine back there, dude. It's cool. Like, it's fitting." And I'm like, you know what? If I'm gonna ever have a nickname, at least it has a meaning and a purpose, and it came from something organic, not just like, "Oh, you're the engine." You know what I mean? Because it's Engen is how it's said, but that's whatever. It depends where you're from in the world.
I was in my head, it was Engen.
Yeah.
And then I saw something online of like the engine. I'm like, is it Engine now? Because
right.
when I read it, it was Engen. So.
Yeah, most people get it right too. It's just a play on words. Now we ran with it, and I feel like the engine's dying off a little bit now, so that's good. But if I'm gonna have a nickname, that's perfect. It works for me, and it's funny. But yeah, dude, that's funny. Yeah. Thanks for talking to me too. It's fun to get to finally chat with you and whatnot.
Sure.
Hit me up whenever too, man. Anytime.
For sure. Anybody that's listening and watching, social media at Charlie Engen.
Yep, everything's just at Charlie Engen.
And if you're looking to learn how to play drums, hit him up.
Hit me up. I'm a good teacher. I got my master's in music, and it's all I've done for years. I love it. It's my passion. So it's I'm a good teacher. I'll give myself a pat on the back for that.
Awesome, man. Yeah, and it's one of those things. Like if you're a techie nerd and you're like, oh, but he plays for an arena rock band. Like who cares? Right. You used to play with Scale the Summit, which is insane, and you're insanely talented. But thank you so much for your time. And dude, when hopefully when the quarantine's lifted and you guys get back on the road, I can come out, bring you some of those fancy beers.
Absolutely, man. And new Scale the Summit album will be out this summer at some point. I played on that as well.
Oh, awesome, fantastic.
And it's sick too. You're gonna like it. If anybody likes Scale Summit, this is by far my favorite Scale record. Like there's not even one that is close to it for me.
Killian's on that too, right?
Yep.
Oh yeah, dude's a homie from Miami, man. Back in the day.
I love Kill. I talk to him all the time.
Awesome, brother. Well, hey, cheers to you. Thanks again, man.
You too, man. Yep. I'll talk to you later.
Later.
See ya.